Hey there, second installment of part whatever on this alteration. If you recall, we've increased this waist and hip from 36 inches to 42. We've made the apron larger, and we've done that by robbing a pleat from either side. Now, somebody had asked me about what you do with the tartan top band, because of course it's going to be too short. When I was looking at the thing, something caught my eye. It looked a little bit odd, and what appears to have happened is the person who made this kilt pieced it together from three small pieces so that each piece lined up with the tartan it was adjacent to. Because generally we have just a long piece of cloth which we unroll. But so the front part was perfectly lined up with the apron. The center part was approximately so, because of course this is scaled down a couple of inches, and then the same job done on the inner apron. A lot of extra work. I consider it more detail than is really necessary. So I took the thing apart, I pieced them together as closely as I could. So you can see there's a seam here, hand sewn seam here, a little more visible on the back side, a second seam here, and it's I'm going to crow a little bit because I had to rub my hand along it to see the seam. If we put a seam like this at the distinction between one color and another, they're a little harder to see. But of course it was still too short. Now under my desk I have several tubs of offcuts like this, but I've never done this particular tartan before, so I didn't have a piece to use. Fortunately, because I'd shortened the kilt a little bit, there was a tiny bit of cloth, and from that I sewed the extender on. Now it's not a perfect match because it's on the inside apron and it doesn't show anyway, but it's done as neatly as we can possibly manage. I've attached the first buckle, the second buckle. Now, and I've sewn it through and through, and you can't see it. The red on the brown, the red on khaki seems to be really effective camouflage, but I've sewn it right through, not just sewing it to the top layer of tartan, because it really doesn't accomplish much and it risks pulling the material. Now, other kilt makers, and I've seen this for years, they have this wonderfully adroit way of folding the cloth like sort of tartan origami and then sewing it in place, and it's, well done you for being able to do that. But the problem is when you take it off for an alteration, the thing just kind of springs apart. It's rather like rolling a cigarette one-handed. It's an interesting skill, but not one I'm going to bother with. So I've taken this one and I've sewed it up properly so it's got integrity whether it's attached or not. I'm a little annoyed and bemused at whoever the original person was, who did very, very good workmanship, but they did things like use really the worst color thread possible to sew this on. So this is going to be sewn on through and through. Looking on the inside, the steeking was in an unusual spot, so I've sewn the steeking down at the bottom of the fell stitch, which is where it should be. As I said, with that fault in the cloth, I used another piece of scrap cloth and I carefully sewed it in as a patch so that when the lining is in, we're not going to see any rough bits. I've sewn in the lining on the ends. I use a cotton flannel, which I find is a better choice than the silk, the shiny silk or satin cloth. The satin and silk is almost invariably a light color, like white or off-white, and it also equally invariably shows sweat marks, and it's not an attractive look, even though you're only the person that sees it. On the inner apron, I've left the lining open, and you can see there where I've signed my work and the date that I repaired it. And I'm going to leave that open until the customer comes, because we want to properly fit the kilt to him. So when he arrives, the kilt will be like this. I'm generally quick as hell, but when people are watching, obviously I just go to pieces. The kilt will be like this. The strap will get easier with time. I use very heavy straps on the inner apron because they're taking all of the load. I wasn't able to use the homemade straps that he put on years before because they're really poorly made. They're a nice color and the right width, but they're really poorly made, so we're throwing those out. So when he arrives, having this in place, with the lining in place of course, I can properly fit it to him and sew it up. So next stage This lining goes in, and then we call the customer and tell them it's ready.